Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Khanam Durrani, and the topic of my today's presentation is bioethics and technology. So let me tell you that what are ethics. So ethics are the moral beliefs and rules about right and wrong. Ethics is also a study of questions about what is morally right or what is morally wrong. Now, what are bioethics? So, it is derived from Greek word bio, as we all know that bio means life, and ethikos mean moral. So, bioethics is philosophical study of ethical controversies brought about by advances in biology and medicines. Next thing is bioethics relate. Bioethics relate with which things? So bioethics relates with applied ethics, like applied to actual ethical problems. Clinical ethics, withdrawal and withholding life support, doctor-patient relationship. Environmental ethics, it includes genetically modified food, air pollution, etc. Biotechnology, which include brain-computer interface, Department of Defense and bioterrorism. Public health, it includes newborn screening, blood banks, vaccination, FDA. Animal rights, it includes euthanasia, chimeras, xenotramps, and attention. Now, let's move toward history of bioethics. So in the 20th century, there have been numerous unethical and inhuman experiments performed on human test subjects in the United States that were often performed illegally without the knowledge or informed consent of the test subject. For example, Nazi experiments. In Nazi experiments, Nuremberg's doctors tried 23 German physicians who either participated in the Nazi program to euthanize persons deemed unworthy of life or who conduct experiments on concentration camp prisoners without their consent were tried. Next, if we look back from history, so next thing is twin experiment. So twin experimentation was one of Joseph Mengel's main interest. These experiments were cruel and unthinkable. The two main experiments that were conducted on twins were injecting needles in the child's eyeball to see if their eye color would change, and if so, whose eye would change faster. Next was head injury experiments, in which they hammered the head of little kids. It involved strapping a young boy to a chair so that this movement could be restricted. Above his head was adjusted a machinized hammer that came down and hit his head in intervals of every few seconds. The torture, it goes unsaid, drove the body insane. Next is bone muscle nerve transplantation. First of all, you can look in this picture that they want you to know about the possibilities of bone, muscle, and nerve regeneration. Secondly, and for the same, they extracted the bones and the other said parts from the subjects without even administering anesthesia to the subjects. Subsequently, the subjects suffered mutilation, sheer agony, and permanent disability. These were some examples of violation of bioethics from history. Principle of bioethics. So everything have its basic principles. So bioethics have its two. First of all, respect for person. Autonomy. Autonomy means informed voluntary consent or protection of vulnerable persons. Next is beneficence or non-maleficence. It includes protection of right, investigator, study design, well-beginners of subjects, or more benefits than risk. Justice and non-exploitation. It includes fairness, equitable requirements of participants, caring of vulnerable group. Next is autonomy. Autonomy includes self-determination. The elements of autonomy are the ability to decide, the power to act on your decisions, a respect for the individual autonomy of others. While the next principle of bioethics is justification of paternalism. If lie benefits the person lied to, that is, the lie prevents more evil than it causes for a specific person. The next basic and most important thing is confidentiality. A patient's basic right to expect the information he gives a healthcare practitioner to the held undisclosed or unexposed. Next is, what is the importance of bioethics in healthcare? Why we are using bioethics in healthcare? So the answer is, healthcare ethics deals with the ethical issues in healthcare, medicine, and in sciences. Ethical codes and application have long history from ancient era. In present scenario, both advancement in medical fields and challenges are increasing in same place for healthcare providers to deal with these ethical issues. While bioethics in healthcare brings understanding and knowledge among healthcare professionals about medical practices, the most important thing are the ethical issues of human reproductive technologies. So first of all, I want to like to tell you that human reproductive technologies HRT. The first basic element is contraception. Contraception means that the sex without procreation, while HRTs are procreation without sex. Types of HRTs. Types of HRTs include artificial insemination by husband, AIH. Next is artificial insemination by donor, AID. In vitro fertilization, which includes egg donation, embryo donation, surrogacy, new genetics, human cloning, stem cell research, and sex selection. These all are the types of human reproductive technologies. This picture is quite interesting. That arguments for and against surrogacy, and you can see this picture for rent. What's the meaning of this for rent? Let's see. Contraction arguments for commercial surrogacy. So it would talk about bioethics in surrogacy or commercial surrogacy. So we can say that people have the right to procreation and to have a family. And gestation can be regarded as a service akin to babysitting or rearing a child for some else. No buying or selling baby is involved. Or anyone with a sound mind should be allowed, with his or her informed consent, to enter freely into a contractual agreement. So, what are family-based arguments for non-commercial surrogacy? So, if the baby has no genetic ties with the commissioning parents, why not adoption? You can see gestation. That gestation is defining criteria of mother-child relationship. The woman who gives birth to a baby is its mother, even in the absence of genetic ties. This can protect the best interest of the child. Some feminist maintains that the pregnant woman is the first person who has an intimate relation with the child, so she deserves to have the baby. While commercial surrogacy involves the buying and selling of the baby, it should be therefore prohibited. You can see in this picture that it's a big business that exploits, uses, abuses, preys, and commodifies women. So we should stop surrogacy. Family-based arguments. The commissioning parents should follow a procedure similar to adoption of baby. The surrogate mother should give a grace period for changing her mind. And surrogacy should be permissible only if their baby has genetic ties with both commissioning parents and they are married. The result is much better than adoption. What are the best interest arguments against surrogacy? So the arguments based on the family arguments does not serve to protect the interest of all the parties involved, including the baby, because the arrangement is unenforceable. What will happen if the commissioning parents change their mind after the baby is conceived? The surrogate mother is a true mother and has the responsibility to rear the baby, even if she does not want to. Won't the commissioning parents be very upset if the surrogate mother change her mind during the grace period? These all are the much complexities in surrogacy. So, and what will happen if neither the surrogate mother nor the commissioning parents want to keep the baby? What would be the future of this baby? The surrogate mother may have developed an emotional tie with the baby during pregnancy. Should she be allowed to visit the baby? Will it undermine the integrity of the new family if she does that? These are all the questions for human reproductive technologies, especially for surrogacy. So let's get ethical. Now, if I talk about the new genetics, then the question arises in my mind that what is new genetics? So, new genetics involve genetic testing or gene testing. It creates an unnecessary psychological distress, in which discrimination by employers and insurance companies, in which confidentiality and privacy, and the basic thing is social stigmatization. Prenatal screen, which is very beneficial, but sex selection, gender discrimination, and imbalance of sex ratio, unless it is done solely for therapeutic purpose. It is better if we use it for therapeutic purpose. Discrimination, life of disabled are not worth living. Genetic engineering, genetic engineering is the new thing. Genetic engineering is basically germline changes. It includes germline changes and somatic modifications. Germline changes, unlike somatic modifications, can pass on to the next generation and be with us forever. So it's an interesting one. So germline changes should be very risky, but every picture has its other side. So germline changes could be very risky, as genetic therapy may be all right. Not that reproduction without sex or abortion is involved. Is it a form of eugenics? This is the basic question, that genetic testing is a form of eugenics or not. Is genetic enhancement moral or not? I guess it's not. Dignity of a child. Parental love should not be based on the traits and the characters of a child. Children should not be treated as a mean to please their parents. What about genetic engineering? That the parents love that their baby should high IQ level. It would have a 20/20 vision, perfect pitch, and their favorite characteristics. So a child should not be treated as means to please their parents. Human cloning. In human cloning, two techniques are used: embryo splitting and nuclear substitution, and it's highly unethical. Stem cell research. There are three types of stem cells. Stem cells are basically undifferentiated, multipotent precursor cells which are capable of developing into virtually any body tissue. And we know that there are three types of stem cells, including embryonic stem cells, ESC, fetus stem cell, and adult stem cells. You can see in it that medulla converted into blastocytes, while inner cell mass and ESC culture converts into further muscle cell, blood cells, neurons, intestinal cells, pancreatic islet cell, and liver cells. Potential treatments. Embryonic stem cells is most promising for treatment, and therapeutic cloning can avoid the problem of immunological incompatibility. Ethical issues. It's beneficial, but it's also have ethical issues. So what are its ethical issues? That destroying an embryo to harvest embryonic somatic cell is equivalent to killing a child and to obtain his organ. Therapeutic cloning is the embryo is not created for reproduction. How about the well being of many patients who may be cured by embryonic stem cell research? It's still a question. Next thing, boy or girl? Is it ethical or unethical? Sex selection, ethical or unethical? So, first of all, I tell you that what are the arguments against sex selection? So, conservative arguments are that abortion is morally wrong. It's unnatural to separate sex from procreation. Even early abortion is morally justified in some exceptional cases, but the preferences for the children's sex cannot serve as a justification for granting an exception. It does not meet the criteria for termination of pregnancy. Termination of pregnancy is not ethical. Next thing is bisex ratios. Bisex ratios. So when the proportion of women is lower, they may be confined to the traditional gender roles and excluded from high status positions. When their proportion is higher, misogyny increases and women are likely to be exploited in sexual relationships and have difficulty in finding committed male partners. Or it may be that the chance of homosexual relationships increase. Dignity of a child. Parental love should not be based on the traits and the characters of a child. Children should not be treated as the means to please their parent. I already told you that. But a feminist strategy for undermining patriarchy is choose to have boys and raise them as non-sexiest. Choose to have girls as to cut down the proportion of men dissociating from the ruling sex class and establish all female communities. The impact on sex ratio is largely uncertain if sex selection not for medical reason is legalized in developed countries. So I can say that it's highly unethical. Some reflections. The root of the problem is not technological. Sex selection per sex is not unethical. Sexism is the source of the problem. Yet, unregulated use of the technology may reinforce the existing gender biases and make the situation even more worse. So, finally, at the end of this human reproductive technologies, I can only say that let's get ethical. Next is transgenic organism and ethics. We all know that what are transgenic organism, as they are organisms with have genetic modified genes, genetic modified things in it. Their genes are modified. So, what are the problems relating to GMOs? Genetic modified organisms. Ethics. They are playing God. They are tampering with nature by mixing genes among species. They are playing with nature. They are not mandatory in some countries like Canada and the United States, in which mixing GM groups with non GM confound labeling attempts. Health risk. If we talk about health risk of the genetically modified organism, then they are the accelerated aging, health risk associated with GM food, infertility, gastrointestinal system, and changes in major organs. Some studies show that GM diet toxic reactions create toxic reactions in the digestive tract. So, the very first crop, the flavor savored tomato, showed evidence of toxins. Out of 20 female rats fed the GM tomato, 7 developed stomach lesions. So, it's a very bad effect on their health. Reasons why GM plants present unique in nature. It creates mutation and in around the insertion site and elsewhere creates unpredicted alteration. A second objection concerns genetic contamination. You can see in this figure that the visible effect of genetically modified corn NK603 and Roundup over 90-day trial. First rat fed only GM corn, second rat fed both GM corn and Roundup, and third rat fed up only Roundup. Reproductive failure and infant mortality. The testicles of both mice and rats were fed Roundup ready soybean showed dramatic changes. In rats, the organs were dark blue instead of pink. In mice, young sperm cells were altered. Embryos of GM soy fed mice also showed temporary changes in their DNA flux function compared to those whose parents were fed non GM soy. So, its unnatural things are creating disruption. Allergenicity. Allergenicity, so adverse health effects. It also have adverse health effect due to in part of research by a hybrid in the mid 1990s. They discovered that the soybean plants engineered with a gene from Brazil nuts produce beans that cause an allergic reaction in some people. Toxicity. One of the most recent GM composed crops to suspect of causing toxicity to GM maize is known as MON 863, producing the toxin primarily in the roots, which is the site of entry for the western corn rootworm. Now, the basic danger, the most important danger is antibiotic resistance. And the antibiotic kanamycin is frequently used marker for plant modification, yet it's still used for treating many human infections, as the genes have traditionally come from bacteria. So human pathogens could increase their antibiotic resistance. You can see that in epidemic productions in this figure in Spring Break 2016, germ gone wild, and I love it. This is the current. This can relate with the current situation of 2021 or 2020 when COVID did spend epidemic of COVID-19. It's pandemics now. GMOs and cancer. So some researchers believe that eating GMOs can contribute to develop cancer. It's also a study that they say that principle of GMO is creating mutant genome, and upon interacting the genome of humans while eating it, it can also produce cancer. So it's very dangerous. Genetically modified human. I'm not a science experiment. This picture just touched my heart that I'm not a science experiment. Humans are not born to modify their genes. They are the production of nature. They are the result from the nature, and they are good as they are. They're not. It's no need to change them. And experimentation on human diminished sense of identity and individuality. So I also said that let's get ethical, and it's really highly unethical. Now, the thing as a microbiologist, which I know most, that genetically modified bacteria. Genetically modified bacteria like E. coli bacteria produce clotting factor to treat hemophilia. It's very beneficial. And Streptococcus mutants reduce the formation of cavities if properly colonized in mouth. Next thing is recent rules of bioethics, their violations and advances regarding to biotechnology and genetics. So, genetic technologies and ethics. Although genetic technologies have a great potential to change the medical practice, we know that, we admit it, but it also has a potential to be misused and lead to further health disparities, discrimination, inequality to the human societies around the world. The development and use of technologies such as robotics, nanotechnology, genetic engineering, neurotechnology, and synthetic biology. The major general consensus in the world are the issue of cloning. The issue of cloning, gene therapy, embryonic stem cell research have been at the headlines of many newspapers and magazines for over a decade in many countries throughout the world. While some countries have passed laws on these issues, many countries have not adopted any position and do not have any laws regarding the application of genetic technologies. So, the following generalization can be made regarding the ethical use of new genetic technologies in the categories discussed. First of all, somatic therapy. It is widely considered to be ethical and acceptable in the world because it creates hope to treat diseases such as leukemia. It's a positive side of this picture. Somatic enhancement is widely considered to be unethical since it could introduce a new form of inequality. Germline therapy. It is supported by most people because it helps couple at a risk of passing on serious genetic disease to decide on having a child free of disease by means of medically related trait selection. And the bad side of this picture, I already told you the bad side of this picture, that what are its disadvantages on society. Germline enhancement. Enhancement is widely considered unacceptable throughout the world because it serves no medical purpose. It could also potentially lead to inequality among one generation over the next without their consent. Furthermore, changing the nature of human beings over the long term may have consequences that cannot be predictable at this time. You can see the secret science, secret politics behind this bioethics. We must protect industry from science. War is peace. We must protect research subjects. Scientific ethics, peer review. This picture describes that what are effects of bioethics on our society. Human genetic trait selection is generally supported because it allows a couple at risk of passing on seriously genetic based illness to their child a chance to avoid it. However, genetic trait selection is generally opposed for non medical or social purposes such as selection of desired sex. Human reproductive cloning is universally rejected, while cloning for reverse research purpose is supported in some countries and others strongly oppose it. Embryonic stem cell research is cautionally supported because it is argued that unused embryos resulting during the IVF procedure should be used for research purpose to gain knowledge about stem cells. You may proceed. Places of countries. These are the places of countries around the world in which you can say that the mostly reproductive cloning is prohibited, and 133 countries are those which don't have any policy regarding this bioethics. And the mostly allowed are medically related trait selection and embryonic somatic cell therapy. Chinese court sentenced scientists who gene edited babies. It was a hot topic as the Chinese court on Monday sentenced the doctor who claimed to be behind the world's first gene edited babies to 3 years in prison for illegal medical practice, state media reports. He Juan-Ki, who shocked the scientific community last year by announcing the birth of twins who had allegedly been altered to confer immunity to HIV, was also fined 3 million yuan. It was the China news agency which said it. He was sentenced by a court in Shenzhen for illegally carrying out the human embryo gene edited intended for reproduction. So the conclusion of my topic is ethical decisions ensure that everyone's best interests are protected. When in doubt, don't. Let's get ethical. Thank you so much. It's all from my side. For any query, you can email me. Thank you, Jazakallah.